So I've been on the phone to the local member this morning, and the local member in Hervey Bay is in the middle of changing offices, and they believe that they've lost their seat in the election and have 7 days to clear out their office. So I asked some questions, knowing that they were no longer going to be holding that office, and fantastic answers. Totally fantastic answers. Very clearly demonstrates that the members have very little sway in anything that goes on in the command responsibility in the state of Queensland. So we talk about here the Governor of Queensland. So I ended up ringing the office of Bundaberg, and again the lady was quite nice to me, and she's taken on a complaint in relation to some things that the state of Queensland have done, which is to be considered fraud. Fraud. And because we're the little men, all of us are the little men that they don't care about. These politicians are there and they are ignorant. They don't know about the world around them while they serve this office. And thanks to the office of Bundaberg, I kind of got a little bit of an insight of what leaving that office is about, and shredding all that paperwork means, and what it means for that other side to come into office, and what was said by parties in relation to this election. And I can honestly say that the people that run for office are mostly disgusting people. It's the reason they run for office. To look all good with their ego chest puffed out, like those LMP people, right? But then don't actually do anything for you because they want a career in politics to be able to drive their changes in the suburb at your expense, the little people. Your expense, the little people. And what makes you big is when you unite together in one voice, united in a federal commonwealth. You have one over and above all of these politicians to stand there and speak as men of this country over and above your public servants. But because you act like children and never unite in the business of it, they never listen. They never ever stop and listen. They keep doing the bidding of foreign interests in your land because you're too asleep to who they work for in that United Nations. So what do the little people do if these oligarchy keep oppressing you with the idiots that they put into your offices? Now, we discussed how the Senate is ignorant, doesn't know things, can't hold the government to account in that ignorance. Can't hold the government to account in that ignorance. Can't hold a command line responsibility to account for the actions of Angus Campbell in Afghanistan. Directly responsible for those actions, and the lieutenant commander that everyone ignored, that commanded those men on the ground, I believe he came out to try and do politics when everyone was shot by a LRAD at Canberra using acoustic weapons on the Australian population. Should demonstrate that the Australian government is the United Nations. It should demonstrate that they fenced themselves up to protect themselves from you. From all of you. Going back to that shooting in the Lindt chocolate shop in Sydney, not Canberra, in Sydney. Remember that? Remember that? There was more to that than they let you know about on the news. There was a media hype about it to put fear into all of you. Same with that incident in Queensland regarding the sovereign citizens that were murdered by the police. Murdered by the police. Use that media as propaganda to put fear into the little men, to stop them from uniting and being that federal commonwealth, to say to a nanny state, stop, you're in father's house and you won't treat father's sons like you do. This is our house, not yours. The little men keep getting pushed around by ignorant politicians, ignorant police officers, people that just follow the law, people that just do what the state puts down on the table, thinking that it's normal for the state to even impact you in your private life. Now, I had a long discussion with the lady on the phone in relation to human trafficking and slavery, right? And the state impacting in the private, and why they have this thought that they can run the people here as members of the public. Anderson versus Commonwealth, 1925. I don't retain title of office to be a member of the public. I spoke to a member of the public on the phone when I rang the offices of the Parliament in Queensland and the Federal Parliament in Hervey Bay. So they're public officials, they're public servants that have made you serve them, that have made you serve them. And that's the technical reality here. You wouldn't be fined by the state at all if it didn't have the attitude that it needed to push a child to make it grow up. Here, have a fine, grow up and don't do that again. Why is the nanny state treating you like the child in your own land? Why are they impacting you from using your land freely? Is it no longer your land on a United Nations monopoly board? Right? In an act of usufruct. I forget what they call it when they put this monopoly board down on top of your land. Military abeyance, A-B-E-Y-A-N-C-E. Military abeyance is when they come and put a monopoly board down on all of your stuff and make you run in their monopoly board instead of your own stuff underneath it. A military abeyance. And then instead of using the assets of the country under Hague for War on Land, Article 55, where it says administrator under the rules of usufruct, which has a right to agriculture, mining, fisheries, and a fourth one, forestry. That's an administration of assets to pay off a country's debt. And then come along 1986, they took your guns away from you and put the debt onto your backs directly in slavery, in a real world slavery. And then they used the police to human traffic you by issuing you traffic notices that make you then sweat labour for the state. Then they have corrupt magistrates, which we've already pointed out to the Supreme Court of Queensland, that don't give a crap about reality and just push their policy on you and make you adherents to a nanny state that put that monopoly board down on what was all of yours in the first place. Now, if we come to this change of usufruct, and the Pope calls in all movable property, and you don't rise up to be the naked owners of it, then who runs it? And why have you let someone else run what was yours in the absence of the man that military occupied you? Who's doing that? Why is the gold going up like crazy and the Australian dollar going down like crazy? Why is the state using the police to human traffic people in the state? Why is the state in debt? Why did the state threaten you and torture you with all their abuse and slander over the jibbies? Do you remember those premiers threatening you? Do you remember those premiers abusing you? Do you remember those state parliaments gathering together and being complicit in that abuse and that torture? Did you see the media participate in that torture? Did you see the media manipulate the population into subordination of the state instead of reporting the news? Did you see fake mask events created by the police and Channel 7 and Channel 9, actually orchestrated with actors in front of our very eyes and then put on the national TV that night as gospel news when it was an orchestrated and acted out event? The police got one of their own in civilians to be forced masked in front of a camera, where police actually forced a mask onto his face. And you all believed that the police acted that way when they created an act on a stage, a play, planned creation. Propaganda is the word. Propaganda is the word when they lied with the help of Channel 7 and Channel 9 to do that in front of a camera, to have the police put on the news that night to put fear into all the little people. So if we want to do something about our country and be like Iceland and point the finger at all these war criminals and see them come to justice, we need to grow up and start acting like grown-ups and start taking the business to them and start accusing them directly of the actual criminal offences that have taken place. We should be reporting all of these crimes to the Australian Federal Police, whether they acknowledge them or not, because that goes through a computer system where it will all be recorded by date and time, making them liable for not acting on a war crime by aiding and abetting war criminals while obligated to all of those rules in The Hague and Geneva that were installed in some military code called the Criminal Code 1995, while that military power held military abeyance over all of your land and treated you like wards of state because you ran out of money. And in that, they brain trained you slowly to become dumber and dumber and dumber and dumber, to honestly believe that the state had some power over you when all of your power was united in a federal commonwealth with God, King and country. And that had power in the fabric of it all, as defined in the engineer's case. The fabric is the underlying realm and God that was forged in the Treaty of Versailles, bringing around a 1920 engineer's case in the first place. So we can see by the engineer's case that they're obligated to hear the Crown and issues in relation to that, and they're obligated to listen to all of you, the little men, when you gathered together to become that one big man, like Adam, the naked owner in the garden. That one man we called mankind, who they made male and female. That's who we are. We're in that realm, with that God, and not this occupier's God who wants you to believe in all of this communist, woke, rainbow ideology to brainwash you out of God, King and country, so that you don't stand up as the fathers who defend Numbers 1, gathered all the fathers and their sons 20 years and older who could go to war. To defend. To defend. Matthew 6:24, you can't serve two masters. Are you serving the stone of destiny or the stone of scone? Or are you serving the stone of remembrance in the shrine in Melbourne, defining the anchor point of your realm, so defined with the anchor and crown and wreath on the door of that very shrine? Do we ignore all the concrete on the ground that defines who we are and let these politicians mock it? Or do we stand up as the little men united and become man and actually approach them and tell them we've had enough, and we'll gather the funds and we'll see them liable and accountable for all of the crimes that they've committed while in office, working for the public? Because we're in the private, right? They trick you into being in the public because of the tax return, using the Reserve Bank note, forcing you to participate in some sort of taxation where they steal from you first, right? And then ask you to contribute again later, and then fine you if you don't adhere to all of their policies, right? And you believe that tax pays things in the country? Did you ever think you borrowed money off a bank and that tax may be the liability or performance duty on that loan? On that loan. So how does your tax pay anything in the country when you borrowed the money from a bank in the first place to pay back the bank with some sort of manipulation of the people without telling the people that you were doing that? Without telling anybody that that's what your modus operandi was to enslave them and put the sweat labour directly on their backs in a direct act of human trafficking. Now, we could talk about other people going through this. We could all whine by ourselves and be heroes that think we're going to martyr ourselves for this cause. But all you're doing is weakening man by not being all the little people standing united in it. It's only then when you become that people, you have a voice where we can speak on your behalf. Fly a red flag knowing that men will speak on your behalf. Fly a red flag and show that government that you're all in support of your Anzac and who you were before these United Nations peacekeepers arrived on your soil here, right? Fly a red flag because it's the flag of the people that founded this country. Fly a red flag because it's who you really are. That blue flag is a government flag. It's not the flag of the people. It's not the flag of those men and those sons as the authority with God that is described in that engineer's case 1920. Right? It's very clear that the engineer's case defines that private members of the Constitution, you and I, have an authority over and above the public when we unite and define what they've done to be a serious, heinous criminal offence. Now, you can see these videos remain published. You can see that no one's challenged me in relation to those direct accusations that Mark Butler committed a war crime, that Angus Campbell committed a war crime, that Matthew Reason in the Fixated Persons Unit, New South Wales, committed a war crime. We have put these crimes on the table and no one has challenged them. Must make them real, right? Must make them real. Enough of a threat for the Fixated Persons Unit in New South Wales to go and attack someone, right? To protect themselves from committing that war crime in the first place. Well, here's news. You did it. You tried to do it to me, and there is evidence on the table that demonstrates what you did, it's a war crime. You already committed it, just like those federal members that authorised the jibby-jabby. You already did it. It's not like we have to go and frame you for doing something. You put all the evidence on the table of you doing it yourself, Matthew Reason. So you should be brought before those courts. You should be dragged off to The Hague. You should be dealt with as the war criminal you technically are, Matthew Reason. And that same goes to all these other names that I've named on the record very clearly from Tony Abbott forward. Right? Because I don't have evidence going back before Tony, but I'm sure there's lots. I'm sure there's lots of evidence that proves that this government is a lying, manipulating, gaslighting government that treats you like a bunch of prisoners. Putting cameras up all over your suburbs, watching you with AI, using that AI to control your land, to control your trade, to control your finance, health, services, everything. We can't deal with that unless you join us in the internet, where you have to log in and give us all of your private information before we'll deal with you. You need to go to the metaverse and join the metaverse, because real people in Parliament no longer operate in Parliament, they operate in the metaverse. We can't take your phone call, send us an email. We can't send you a form, go to the website and fill out all of your private information before you can get the form. This is the way they're treating you. Your public servants have become your masters. Matthew 6:24. You can't serve two masters. You'll either love the one and hate the other. A divided house cannot stand. Would you serve that? Would you honestly serve that? This gaslighting, torturous government, after what they did to you very clearly in the media, threatening you. We must get 100%. We must get all of them. We'll chase you all down. You'll be on the back foot here. Remember all the torture that they spat in their vile attitudes out at you? Do you remember? Do you totally remember? Right? I remember. I'm 23 minutes into a video with no cuts, very clearly speaking about the criminal actions of these really evil people. Right? This is, every premier did this in the States. Western Australia and Victoria went over the top with their torture and their war crimes before they even got to the corporate hubs that they installed all around the country on behalf of the person they immunised from prosecution, while that person immunised all of you and put you on a register where they documented what poisons they'd given to you, specifically what poisons, comes under the Poisons Act, remember, and remember that they authorised a poison for use in an emergency. In an emergency. That sounds like forced medical procedure to me. That sounds like a medical experiment. It sounds like mutilation of the cell. Sounds like torture. Sounds like all those rules that I laid down on the table that none of the people in this country want to face. Isn't that right, Albanese? Cretinous, treasonous piece of shit you are. Trying to undermine everyone from the blessing of Almighty God on behalf of foreign interests, going against Section 44(1) of the Constitution. And you sit in the Prime Minister's office. Who appointed that on you? Who gave you that seat? Did your cabinet give you that seat? I don't think they did, Tony. I don't think they did. I think someone had a thumb over you and said, You used to be in a position and you're now going to be the Prime Minister and you're going to be responsible for all of these evil things in the country so that the Liberals can come along and play saviour all over again, like they repeatedly do through the history of this country. It's a two-edged sword here in that they're all attacking you and you can't see it. You sit there whining at them instead of realising that your power is united in a federal commonwealth and denying them any action, denying them point blank, denying them with force if you have to, because that is your right under the Bill of Rights and the engineer's case. You have a right to stand up in your crown and say, who the fuck are you? Foreigner, under foreign oaths, under foreign allegiances, with foreign interests in your pocket, going against Section 44(1) of our Constitution that they administer with their Hague and Geneva Conventions that they broke. So as administrators, are we, the little men, going to put up with these criminals continuing to commit crimes because no one's got the strength to hold them to account? Well, we've got the law. How about we as little men unite and become man and stand up in our cities and say no more? Say no more. We won't be slaved by you. We won't be human trafficked by you. We won't deal with this anymore. You are criminals that did this in a crime and you deserve to be accountable for the crimes you committed. Isn't that right, Butler? Isn't that right, Albanese? Isn't that right, Morrison? Isn't that right, Abbott? Isn't that right, Turnbull? Right? You all created this. You all scammed the people out of their land. And you helped them do it. Going back to your EBAs, Tony. Enterprise bargain agreements. Put on everyone. Right? Fair Work Australia, taking everyone out of the courtroom so you could manipulate them in private contracts instead of judicial process. People need to wake up. And I think they're starting to after they realise post-lockdown, these people don't give a shit. They don't want to be accountable for all their mistakes. They whitewash them in Senate estimates reports instead of reporting them to the Australian Federal Police as the technical war crimes that they are. The technical war crimes that they are. So as we close off on this video, I want you to think. You need to unite. You need to put all your differences aside. You need to stop trying to do all of the law, and you need to realise that your power isn't in the law. It's in uniting together as a federal commonwealth that says no. We won't put up with our public servants doing this to us in a crime. In a crime. And I'm pointing out very clearly to the Parliament right now that those military police have been called, and they will be recalled, and they will be accused of aiding and abetting you to do this to us in a crime. And if they don't uphold rule of law that you all pushed, I demonstrated this very clearly. You all pushed rule of law on us. Now we're pushing it on you. Follow it, Albanese. Start making them accountable for the war crimes you all committed. Follow that rule of law, Albo. To the letter. To the letter. And then look at the Constitution in the spirit of the law. The Holy Ghost. The spirit of those Anzac. Instead of your undermining it with a referendum. You got caught out. You got caught out very clearly doing what you did. It's been pointed out to everyone very, very clearly what you did. And it's up to them now to realise God, King, country, Scripture. Gather all the men. Bring your sons 20 years and older. Unite together. Flex upon them that you're not going to put up with their police anymore. Flex upon them that you won't put up with the police fining you in acts of human trafficking anymore. Putting sweat labour on your backs designed by the very state that is your public service. Your public servants enslaving you. You need to start speaking up for it. You need to start raising this across your communities. You need to start talking to your friends and your families. You need to start talking to your neighbours. You need to start talking to all of the poor that you see around. You need to start talking to all of those victims of the government and demonstrate to everyone we do have a chance. We have a great chance to stand up united as a country over and above that government with God to flex upon them that they've committed an international war crime. And we totally expect them to be accountable for it. Totally expect them to be accountable for it. Right? That's where we need to go. That's what I'm asking you to do. I'm asking you to stop all of this individual, selfish, do-it-for-yourself stuff. Actually, I'm not asking you to stop. Keep doing it. What I'm asking you to do is stop relying on everyone else to do that individual, selfish stuff for yourself and join with everyone else to do what is greater and more important while you keep harassing them for all of those fines. And you keep bringing before the courts the fact that they are the United Nations. And you keep bringing to the courts that you believe the magistrate has not performed an act of justice, denial of fair justice, because it's a magistrate's court. Slap, little child. Get on your way. Learn a lesson. The state's your nanny. Are we going to put up with that anymore? Or are we going to become the men of this country and tell our public servants to go back to being a servant, going back to serving our government that is supposed to govern our assets, not us. Our assets, not us. Right? So I want you to think as we close off now, who are we for them to do this to us? Who are we if we don't stand united in a federal commonwealth? Who are we if we don't obey the law in the engineers case and push rule of law back on them? Are we children or are we men?